Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Beyond Pandas, discover China's rare mountain wildlife, presented by NatHab expedition leader and naturalist, Brad Josephs. Thanks for being here today, Brad. I'm gonna hand it off to you.
Hey, thank you guys for logging in. Thank you, Kendall. This is, I've done a bunch of webinars, I think maybe 30 or something during the pandemic. And I've done a lot on pandas, and I've done another one on China, but I always kind of have to skip over this topic, and I'm surprised that I waited this long to do it, because it's one of the coolest things that I've experienced, is getting to know this rare mountain wildlife of China. So right now, today, we're just going to focus on that. I'm not going to talk too much about the specifics of our trip, which I will do upcoming. I'm going to do another webinar on China and the trip itself, and it'll answer lots and lots of questions. But if I did all that, then I wouldn't have time to talk about all these cool things. So yeah, and I've been guiding in China since 2008, and to be honest, it is among my favorite places in the world, and a lot of that is because of all these cool, amazing, unique, super rare animals that we have actually found ways to see on trips, which is unbelievable. To me, it's kind of one of my things that I'm most proud of in my whole career, for sure. Okay, so first of all, China is an enormous place. I mean, it's roughly the size of the United States. And a lot of it is it's been colonized by humans and inhabited by humans and civilization. It's got 5,000 years of civilization. So that's going to be kind of difficult, because humans tend to take habitat away. We almost can't help ourselves, especially thousands of years ago. So, but there are still pockets that are incredible, and I mean, because of it's such a huge area, that it's got also so much latitudinal diversity. So you've got southern tropical rainforest, you've got boreal taiga forest up in the northeast corner that's like Alaska. You also have the highest mountains, some of the highest mountains in the world. And then there's also this Tibetan Plateau region. So it actually ranks, this is going to blow you guys' mind. You'll never have thought of China. Okay, so first of all, with all the political things that have happened, China already had a pretty bad stigma painted on it from the media to the United States. And that stigma has only worsened tremendously with the pandemic and everything else. So, and it really kind of breaks my heart, because what my dream is because I know the magic of China. I know the magic of Chinese people, and I know the magic of the landscape and the wildlife. And what I've always tried to do is build a bridge and a friendship. And it just seems to have gotten more difficult. But anyway, these statistics are going to blow your mind. Did you realize that China ranks third in biodiversity in countries in the world, after Brazil and Colombia? Well, there's 35,000 different species. There's 551 species of mammals, 1,200 species of birds, 424 species of reptiles, and 333 species of amphibians. So that is something that a lot of people, when you think of China, it's not like when people think of Costa Rica. But it's just amazing. It's like, think about the United States, where you've got the deserts of Mexico, you've got, the forests of Alaska, the Great Plains. I mean, it's that kind of country. It's just so unknown to humans, to outsiders, Americans, and other people from Western countries and European countries. That's the most exciting part about it, is just the discovery of stuff that you've never heard of. So right now we're going to talk about a giant panda habitat, which is in this enormous province of Sichuan, right here. And it is definitely the most, I would say it's among the most diverse, probably the most diverse species-wise of any of the provinces, because it's subtropical, but it also goes all the way up to some of the highest mountains in the world that are well over 20,000 feet. Sichuan is made up of basically mostly mountainous, and then also the region up here is the Tibetan Plateau. It's a plateau, kind of like a Great Plains, but it's all over 10,000 feet with mountains that go well over 20. Then you've got these mountains, which is kind of it'd be like the Rockies ×3 as far as ruggedness and size. And then you've got this subtropical basin down here, which is which has been called as the kingdom of heaven because it's so lush with agricultural resources and culture also. So originally, when I started guiding in China, it was in 2008, and I basically took over for the original guide because it was right after the earthquake, and she just had something else going on. I can't remember. Anyway, so I just filled in for her, and I filled in because I was a bear person and I had experience in Asia, and that trip was mostly focused on pandas. But really, the whole trip itself was kind of a cookie cutter tour. We visited these amazing panda bases where pandas are being bred in the wild. I'm sorry, in the kind of like semi-wild or in these breeding centers, so you can get an up close look at lots and lots of pandas. But it wasn't like truly being in a wild area. And then we would see the Great Wall and then the terracotta warriors and stuff. But I remember one comment from one of the people. I can't believe this is an ADAP trip, and this trip has been cool. China's cool, but we didn't see one wild animal on the whole trip, not even a squirrel. And I said, yeah, that's it. It's true. I said, but it's China. Unfortunately, it's just how it is. And I didn't even know anything about China at that time. But anyway, the point is that with the giant panda, which I've already done, I've talked about pandas in lots of my webinars, so I'm going to skip over them. It's hard to do, but I have to. The giant panda just attracted people to this trip because people, the thousands of people want to go to the zoo in Washington, D.C. to see a panda. But when you go to China, when you go to these breeding centers, it's just pandas, pandas, pandas. And so you just see so many, and moms and babies and multiple babies and playing, and it's just fantastic for panda lovers. But for wildlife lovers, other than, the panda, it is really, really lacking. But on my last night, when the group had flown home, I stayed an extra couple days. And I hung out with this guy in the middle, I've done a webinar with him called China's Changing View on Conservation. It's a webinar that I did, and it was me and him together, and we talked about China and the evolution of conservation, just like United States, kind of with the Rachel Carson and the DDT. We evolved, and Theodore Roosevelt, that whole history. We evolved to be more, we value our natural resources, our wildlife, our wildlands. Well, China's going through that right now as they've become wealthy, and they actually can afford to do that. And I talk about the Chinese history and everything involved in it. Anyway, so this guy Philip was my national guide. So we guided together, and we became very good friends. Now I would say it's more like brothers. And at the last night, he took me out to dinner in Chengdu. And he brought a photo album. This was before digital pictures, and he started showing me pictures of these expeditions. Well, he grew up in a very, very remote area in Tibetan region in that mountainous region of Sichuan. And I actually went to his house once. I went on many adventures with just me and him and explore. But he definitely is a very much the only guide I'd ever met in China that was really had a huge interest in nature and experience with animals and wildlife. And he showed me, he said, Brad, sometime you come back, I'll take you on a real adventure. We'll go into the mountains. And he showed me all these pictures of animals that I couldn't believe. I said, you mean you see that in the wild? He said, yeah, I took this picture. I couldn't believe it. So the next winter, I went back with couple friends. I put this trip together with just me and Philip, a couple of my best friends, my little sister, my wife, and we went in the winter time to go search for the giant panda in the wild in these nature reserves. And it was unbelievable to get back into this area. It was also one of the most difficult, crazy adventures of my life. But we actually came very, very close to seeing a giant panda. I mean, I could hear it. You could see the bushes moving as it moved off. Here's me and some panda scat. But it was incredible, and I just was enthralled with this Chinese wilderness that I never knew even existed. I said, but I mean, obviously, trips like this, you can't bring NatHab groups on it. I mean, we were camping out for 3 weeks, going up and down 3,000-foot cliffs and stuff like that. But I was definitely enthralled by this kind of region. But years later, as I began to guide the China trip full time, my NatHab China destination manager, Shannon, and we were just discussing like, oh, let's expand and see if we can maybe be the first company to do like real wild animal trips in China. Anyway, if you want to see a video of, it's actually like a little kind of mini documentary of journal that I edited together. It's on my YouTube channel. It's called In Search of the Giant Panda. If you search it, if you search In Search of the Wild Panda, if you do that on Google, it'll comes up first. So it really kind of shows all this crazy stuff that we did, and it's a really cool video. Anyway, so we were going to try to be the first. We were going to try to explore, do what NatHab does best, to be innovative and adventurous, and try to make products that really don't exist. To see nature and wildlife in China, definitely there was nothing like that going on. So Philip and I went exploring and we went scouting, and he said, there's a very special place that I want to take you to, and it's a nature reserve in Sichuan in the mountains. And I don't actually tell the name of it because it's still very much a secret to the outside world, a golden secret, and I don't want it to get spoiled, like, you know. So, but I mean, this region of mountains, it has 430 species of mammals, 2,400 species of plants, and 150 species of birds. And it's a grade 1 WWF sort of for biodiversity. And basically, it was, I mean, most of the region was, kind of closed to foreigners. China's a difficult place like that. But I met with them, and I met with the people that work there, the staff, and I was one of the first foreigners to ever go there. And I spent a week going every trail. We went camping, backpacking, everything. But before I was able to actually get permission, I had to explain to the sort of the director of the refuge who I was. I was affiliated with World Wildlife Fund, with NatHab, and when I explained our theory, I mean, our theory of responsible ecotourism and conservation, and they liked it, and they said okay, and they basically, we still have very, very close relations with this reserve, and we get special permission to do things that are totally closed down to the public. So it's just a really awesome thing. And then in turn, we have given them a lot of insight that we've learned from other regions, where there's conservation, on how to properly conserve this place the right way, to sort of keep the animals and stuff safe. But I mean, we basically within easy walking distance of a dirt road that's closed, but I could go up in there. I mean, we were finding panda scat. It was rich panda habitat, and I said, wow, I can actually run a trip here. And there's even, and because of what happened in Sichuan, you had this tremendous earthquake. I could talk about that earthquake for an hour, but it was devastating. Well, China is, even in 2008, very wealthy country, and they did this tremendous stimulus program to rebuild the region that was affected by the earthquake. So they did, like, rebuilt the roads, and even put in, strangely, they just put in this hotel. It's quirky and interesting, but it's definitely doable for our groups, but it's stuck right in the middle of this incredible wildlife habitat. Anyway, so we redid the itinerary. We assembled a team of amazing staff there that had interest in nature, nurtured it, gave them careers, and kind of get this whole program boosted up. Now we run 8 trips a year that are full, of course, pre-COVID, which is a big deal. They're 2-week trips. And it's just a great success story. We've had so many amazing trips. There's my manager, Sandy, down there with the panda at the bottom left, who's just kind of, her and I just just wanting to do something awesome that nobody else has done before, and it's been a tremendous success. And so a lot of these wildlife pictures that I'm going to show you, it's basically taken walking along these old roads. In fact, roads that George Schaller used to use when he did some of his first preliminary panda research in the 1980s. And roads that you have to have special permits that we can get, and other people just can't get in there because the wildlife habitat's too sensitive. So So giant pandas, the giant panda conservation story that I've done a whole webinar with Philip, and I explain everything. But long story short, it is the greatest conservation story in history of the world, I believe. Bringing back giant pandas, which are extremely sensitive species, very difficult to breed in captivity, very particular in their habitat, in a place with a huge habitat loss. And you were in China during these tumultuous years where conservation wasn't at the key. However, the giant panda got the attention of the Chinese because it's part of their culture. And it's such an amazing, beautiful, cute, charismatic species. They decided to make this a priority. And the success has been unbelievable. And even since 2003, there's been a 17% increase in the population up to 1,864 in the wild. And it's gone from just several in captivity in the 1980s to 600 now. And then other ones, of course, in the world that have gone to other zoos in the world. And 67 panda reserves. So that's, I mean, check that out. Check that increase just since 2003. A 12% increase or 27 more panda reserves since 2003. So they're still very serious about saving giant pandas. And that's awesome. So the giant panda habitat is very fragmented. But right now they're currently continuing to expand panda habitat, connect them, do everything. I mean, it's just full on, fully funded, big time conservation effort. Again, not what you hear about on Fox News when they're talking about China. They don't talk about this. They talk about things that, make you not want to go there. But this is happening, and this, they deserve credit for it. And we should, foster that. But there's something about giant pandas that really grasp. I think it's their large eyes, and they just kind of, there's something about them that that humans just can't get enough of. And so one of the great benefits to that and what pandas have done is they're the best example of an umbrella species. An umbrella species is a species that like a tiger or bears, polar bears, that humans connect with, versus say a species of mouse. And they love that animal so much that they want to have those animals in the wild. Well, those animals, they need huge intact areas of intact wilderness. Everything needs to be intact. So what happens is all the other animals that live in that habitat are also protected under the umbrella of this charismatic animal conservation. And in this case, it's giant pandas. So in the middle of the Sichuan Basin is this city, incredibly historic, charming city, my favorite city in the world, bar none, called Chengdu, 16 million people, densely packed. And it's got the atmosphere and the history, and that's where we do. Now we end the trips there now, and we visit and we get to see this incredible. I mean, this trip with the culture is awesome. But as soon as you leave Chengdu, because the government actually owns all the property, the land, it's complicated, but all the families are given these leases that are like kind of goes on forever. But the government really is in control of you don't get this sort of expansion into the countryside where you get corporations buying the farms out and this stuff like that we have in the United States. It's not like that. So when you go from a city that's futuristic and then you drive an hour, all of a sudden you've gone back 300-400 years, it seems. And then in these mountains, because pandas are there, they have special conservation status. And so this is just kind of this giant panda habitat. If giant pandas can live there, there are so many things that I talk about in my webinar about the panda conservation story. So you just go to the Daily Dose and you go down and you'll see in the Asia ones, and it's in there. Okay, so let's talk about the animals that I'm talking about. So this last fall, I found my first wild red panda with our group, and it was up in a tree eating these berries in the fall. And that was unbelievable because actually red pandas are even one of the most difficult animals to see in the wild. And they're we have a huge range, but they actually are in probably worse shape than the giant panda as far as conservation goes. They're very similar to giant pandas, but they're not. They do feed on bamboo. They do have a masked face like that, but genetically they're separate. The giant panda is a bear. Red panda is not. It's in its own family, not Ursus, but it's a Luridae, and they're very unique, special animal that's evolved similar attributes to pandas, such as a pseudo thumb, which is to help grip bamboo stalks that the giant panda has. But it's just evolution has just basically made a parallel to these really cool animals. And to see one of these in the wild was amazing. To see a wild red panda. And so red pandas inhabit giant panda habitat, and they're conserved under that umbrella. This one was amazing. So you see the moon bear, very endangered, heavy pressure from poaching because of their gallbladders. And gallbladders used as a medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, and they've been poached for centuries and suffered habitat loss. And they are so elusive, and there's so few of them. In China, they have a obviously, if you look at the map, much larger habitat in China, although there's only 30,000 of them left in the wild. So there's just very few areas where moon bears are well protected. They don't have the beautiful markings on the face, so humans don't really think about it. So it's an Asiatic black bear, also called a moon bear. And I knew that moon bears lived in this nature reserve, but I waited years to actually see one, and I knew eventually I would. And this is the first one that we saw on one of our trips, and I was just as excited. It just blew my mind. There was a wild moon bear standing on a cliff across from us, just staring at us. And look at those huge ears. I mean, just incredible animal. But what really blew me away is actually moon bears will build a nest in the trees, and so as they go up in these trees and they'll break off branches and then they'll pull them back in so that they can eat the walnuts, the chestnuts, the wild kiwi fruits, the different flower buds that they eat. Instead of just throwing the branch away, they actually pack it in and make a sort of a feeding and a sleeping platform so that they can comfortably stay in that tree and safely. And so they will build a nest. And so in the early spring, before the leaves come out, I just could not believe. Well, first of all, the first time I went up there, they showed me a moon bear nest. I never even heard of a moon bear nest. Anyway, most people don't know they do that. But anyway, when I figured out that's what it was, I looked and I said, there are moon bear nests everywhere. But they're just very shy. But like all the wildlife in this reserve, it's being more well managed. And the Chinese have changing their priority on conservation with funding and things. The animals are becoming less afraid in these protected regions, and these animals are as well protected in the National Wildlife Reserve in China. Those animals are actually more well protected than any animals in the world as far as anti-poaching and all this kind of stuff. There is a 0 chance you get away with anything in China, and the penalties are very severe, and people generally follow the laws in China. So anyway, my point is, I just was like, wow, there's a lot of moon bears. Eventually I'm going to get lucky and see one. Well, about 2 years ago, we figured out a few strategies on how to find moon bears. And so far I've seen, I think, 9 in the wild, and then other guides that have guided trips probably had another 5 or 6 sightings just in the last several years of wild moon bears. Now the pictures aren't great because we are fairly far away. We're looking through spotting scopes and stuff, and it's really low light conditions early in the morning. But these are wild moon bears, and it's just when I tell my bear conservation buddies, my bear friends, colleagues, that we've seen moon bears in the wild, and they just can't believe it. They're like, what, really? So these are just some images that I've taken. Again, they're cropped in and from a far distance, but to be able to see. So that's the thing, is that for some of these animals, the value of seeing an animal so rare, even though it's far away and you can't get a great picture of it. I mean, if you really value that experience of seeing that animal in the wild, to me, it's amazing. So just some more images that we've gotten of these wild moon bear sightings. There's another one up on a cliff there. All right, this is a terrible picture that I took while I was on that first initial expedition in the winter with with Philip. We're looking for giant pandas, and we saw this takin. This is a takin, And I couldn't believe it because this is an animal that I remember looking at in my animal books when I was a child that would just stand out. Like, look at that guy. Just so muscular, so beautiful, so bizarre, unique. And it's incredible to see one in the wild. And this one was from like 3/4 of a mile away through a spotting scope. But had I gone forward in time, or if I could go back in time and meet myself in those mountains and say, you pretty excited about that takin sighting? Well, let me show you the pictures that you're going to be getting on NatHab trips in the nature reserve just next door to here. I would have just wouldn't have believed it. These are some of the images that we get now on foot, hiking along these dirt roads with my group of these wild takins. And then when we first started going to the reserve, the takins were shy. You'd see them for a second and they would go away. But and we helped advise the staff, like how do you treat these animals in order to keep them at peace? Just like, if you're on the roads, don't blow horns, don't go chasing after them. These kind of normal things. And they took it seriously and they've done it. And now these animals actually aren't really that afraid of us anymore. And so we just get to see these incredible. So this animal is kind of like a mountain goat on steroids. It's just so, they're got up 800 pounds, but they also are just as sure-footed as a mountain goat on the cliffs. You'll notice that strange nose. And George Schaller, the panda conservationist in the 80s, described the panda, the takin as looks like a bee-stung moose because of his nose. And that nose is likely because they live at such high altitudes in cold weather, to sort of a warming chamber as that cold air goes into the interior part of the body. But this is just, I'm with my group hiking along this trail on this dirt road, and just this takin crosses the road in front of us. And then takin also always have an interesting habit that is great for photography of once they feel like they're safe, they turn around and just stare at you and just let you have all the time in the world to take pictures, like just this. And just taking them on foot as we're hiking up and down and exploring. So this is pretty amazing stuff if you're a fan of rare wildlife. If you've been to Africa and you've seen the big five enough times, you want to see something different. Takin is pretty amazing. Now you'll notice the different coloration. We're right on the border of Gansu province, so we're in Sichuan. Well, from the mountains, from Sichuan border down is generally an area where there's the Sichuan takin, and they're dark. And then from Sichuan border north into Gansu, they're golden takin. Well, since we're on the border, you get these hybrids of these two subspecies of takin that interbreed, and so you get these kind of mixtures. And so some of them are this incredible golden color. So, the takin are the national animal of Bhutan, and so that's where people often go to Bhutan and can see a takin, or see a takin in a zoo, and they're from Bhutan. But they're very dark and much smaller. These guys are just stunningly gorgeous, and just awesome animal with that mane. So just a few more pictures of the takin. They're in the subfamily of bovid called Caprinae, which is the goat antelopes, same as a mountain goat. A lot of these, and just watching them, as bulky as they are, crossing these rivers and going up these super steep slopes and across boulders and slippery boulders, they just really are incredible to me. So one of my favorite animals in the world. This is a subadult. And this is a tiny calf that, as we were hiking along, the herd was below us, and the calf was just exploring and curious and came right up to us, and it was just, wow. So this is a Chinese Surrou. These are kind of fill the niche of the mountain goats and mountain sheep in China. Also in the subfamily Caprinae. Extremely sure-footed. And they live on the cliffs, but they will come down for water. And so at the right times of day, if we kind of know where to look, we will sometimes get a look at this very rare, super cool. Now this is a bigger version. This is called a Surrou. Again, extremely endangered animal. We don't see these often, but I've probably seen 15 Surrou so far, and they're an impressive animal, but just notoriously very, very shy and elusive. So like this picture just sends chills up my back, even though some folks might say, oh, it's just like a kind of a scraggly goat. To me, I know it's a Surrou, and the fact that that's my image, that I saw that in the wild, is incredible. This is where these animals usually stay, but they always come down for a drink. And in these kind of like super rough, steep cliffs. So in Asia, there's many of these small deer species, and so this is a Rhesus Macaque. And it's so funny because I mean, to me, it's a rare animal, and it's incredible to see one. Except I had a guy from Britain who came, and he was a wildlife addict that had been on a lot of my trips before, and I got so excited. This was the first animal that we saw in this spot, and then I said, look, it's a Rhesus Macaque, and he just said, I came all the way to China for a Rhesus Macaque, and I didn't understand. And then later I learned, they were introduced into England, and now they're just like a backyard pest. And then they're just like, you hate them because they eat all your flowers and you can't get rid of them. But anyway, when you see one in the wild in China, it's very special. Now these guys, in the males of these and all the other small deer species in China, have something really interesting. Their canines are basically tusks. And no other animals of the deer family, but this group of deer species in Asia have this. So this is just another super unique. Just the males will have these tiny antlers and then these tusks, and they use it to fight for females. And they're hard to see, but anyway, they do. They all have these canines. This is another Rhesus Macaque. And now, you know, like say 5 or 6 years ago, we would like see one or two. Now we see them all the time. And so these animals are just getting more comfortable being in areas where we can access. This is a tufted deer, very shy, very elusive. Normally right before dark, we'll see them at the edge of a forest, and a lot of times from far away, and just a small deer that, you know, that grazes. But sometimes now, recently, they are on the road, and then when we walk by or even drive by, they look up and they just don't even care, and we can get some pretty incredible opportunities that I never thought were possible years ago. Such as this one is in the wild, but what happened is there's a ranger station up the valley, about 40 minutes up the valley from where we stay, and we're driving up there early in the morning one year, and what happened was this one of these musk deer had hurt its leg really bad. And it was something that was able to be healed, but it was starving. So the ranger took it back to the station and let it stay outside and gave it food all winter. So it just lost its fear of people. And it was a female. And so the other ones, some males and other ones came by to interact with it. They saw that this one was safe around people. So then you had this small herd that would just feed around in the morning, and we would walk by and they wouldn't even care. Now this is one, I've only seen one of these in the wild. These are not my pictures. Everything else is my pictures from our trips, but this one, I've seen one of these in the wild, and I was only able to get an image of its butt. But this is a musk deer, and this is one of the most endangered, heavily poached of animals in the world, to be honest, because it's called a musk deer. The males have a musk gland, and that is really where the perfume started, from this musk of the musk deer. So even now today, a wild musk deer gland, that, you know, basically it can fetch $20,000 per pound. So incredible pressure, incredible incentive to poach. But in wildlife reserves in China, and there's a lot of them now in Panda area, people don't even think about poaching anymore. I mean, you can definitely see the teeth of these musk deer. It's pretty good. But yeah, this is that scent gland of the males that is so coveted as a aphrodisiac, and then, you know, originally is what you made perfume out of. So wild boars. Now here in Arkansas, if you're a conservationist, you'll find a way to kill every wild boar you can, because wild boars are not native to the United States. Now peccaries are in the Southwest, but the wild boar is brought over from Europe, Eurasia, by the British, you know, hundreds of years ago. It's as a hunt for hunting. Well, they're not native, so they just are incredibly damaging. Like in Arkansas here, are responsible for the decline of the wild turkey population, because they just eat eggs. I mean, they eat everything, and they're impossible to eradicate because they're incredibly smart. They've got great senses, and they are just they become very elusive when hunted, and they also just breed like rabbits. And they'll have multiple litters of 8 each year, and they'll eat anything, and they can always survive. So wild boar is not a great thing in the United States. In Hawaii, it's caused tremendous problems, the invasive wild boar, because they're not supposed to be there, and they've just caused the extinction of lots of plants and ground-dwelling birds and ground-nesting birds or ground-dwelling animals. But if you see them in Eurasia, they're actually integral part of the ecosystem. I guided a trip in Scotland years ago, and they're trying to bring wild boars back. You can't bring back the forest the way it's supposed to be without those native wild boars, which have been eradicated there, because they have a special relationship with the blueberries, and as they till the soil up and disperse berries. So in a place where that animal is evolved, which this animal, all through Eurasia, they're native, you actually need them. And ironically, they're all impossible to find. But in this spot here, in this nature reserve, we have really good luck seeing wild boars. And so when I see one in Arkansas, I don't get super excited. But when I see one in this nature reserve, it's just, wow, there's a wild boar, and they're just big, monstrous guys. Those are some of the sightings of the wild boar. Definitely would be extinct in China, because China's gone through famines, and also I will say that Chinese love pork, like it's their favorite thing, and to have an organic forest dwelling pork is really high on their list, and their conservation status would not get anybody's attention in the 60s and 70s and 80s, but because they live in a panda habitat, they're still there. So there's also a lot of cool primates, and I gotta get going here. So this is the golden monkey, and there's several regions or spots where we've been able to find these golden monkeys. They are very, very, very endangered. There's 3 species of them, but in this area in Sichuan Province, in the Qinling Mountains, there's only about, I think maybe, I can't remember, I think around 10,000 of them in the wild or something. But because they've been hunted a lot for their fur, they are very shy people, very smart. And I did one of my other webinars I did was on the primates of Asia. And I talk a lot about golden monkeys, so I'm not going to talk too much about them now, because there's a lot of other stuff I got to cover in only 20 minutes. But they're just fantastic. And if you ever want to watch a really cool nature documentary, go ahead and see Born in China, and it really goes through the golden monkeys. In fact, a lot of the pictures, these images are from that same troop of golden monkeys that were filmed by Disney. But you'll notice they have no nose, and they're not sure why, except maybe they live at a colder temperature than any primate other than humans. So they can withstand very, very cold temperatures and live up to altitudes of 11,000 feet. So maybe when you go outside, what is the first thing to get cold? Your ears and your nose. Well, their ears are fully fur covered. You wouldn't want to have fully fur covered nose. Nobody does. So instead of it making an extremity, there's no nose at all. I guess maybe to help them, keep them from losing too much heat out of that. Who knows? That's just the postulation. But one of the ways that they keep warm is this behavior called hugging, and they basically huddle up. And it's also kind of a social thing now as well. But these are all pictures that I got on our trip. And yeah, so they just huddle up and hug. But another really cool aspect about them is the fact that they have they're huge troops, even up to, I've read in the literature, up to 600. But it's just made up of a whole bunch of small family units called one male units, where the male is the dominant guy, and he's got basically like 2 or 3 females that are mates, and then their children up until they get to subadults, and then they got to go and start their own thing. But they to be around these guys, because of that structure, is pretty insane, because there's constantly jealousy issues. You're hanging out and you get one male will look at a female too long that's not his, and the other females will attack him, like, don't be looking at her. And then also the same thing, like a male will see another male looking at one of his wives, because they're with each other all the time, and then there'll be this huge fight that breaks out. And so it's pretty incredible, really. And they're awesome jumpers. They're actually close related to the proboscis monkey, and one of the features of both of them are just this tremendous jumping ability, these huge, strong legs that can jump. I don't know what's the limit, but they can definitely do these incredible jumps off branches from tree to tree. And you notice that there's their jumping animals. They have this very, very long tail for counterbalance. But they basically can live up in the winter. In the summer, they eat branches. I'm sorry. Well, flowers, buds, berries, some small fruits and things. And in the winter, they can survive on the inner bark of trees and lichens. Now, they are. Now, how do you find these guys? Oh, you guys might ask about those sort of kind of wart-like growths on the sides of their mouth. Nobody knows what it is. It's just maybe, yeah. There's no known. It's just the sort of something that males have that females find attractive. With the blue face, the golden coat, the shaggy fur, but you know you can't. They do have some pretty big teeth. So how do we see these guys in the wild? Depends. We have to go to different reserves based on conditions and stuff like that. So every trip's always going to be a little bit different. But the reason we're able to get close to these guys is they have certain research stations where they're trying to build back this population, and they found that the number one sort of cause of mortality is overwinter mortality. There's only a certain amount of food, and they're actually building the habitat back for these guys because their habitat loss. Because you could have a nature reserve or golden monkey habitat, people aren't hunting the monkeys anymore, but they might go in there and take the dead trees out for firewood. Well, those dead trees are what hold the lichens, which that's the winter food source. So you lose lichens anyway. So they do some supplemental feeding at certain times of year to kind of keep the populations up. And also they want the monkeys to be habituated to humans so that the researchers can learn about them. And that's where all the research on these very unknown species of primates has come from, by habituating the monkeys, by throwing some apples down. And then, you know, if you're connected to the right kind of people like us, you can go see them. I'm going to speed up. Another fantastic primate that I talked about in my other webinar is the Tibetan macaque. And these guys are kind of known as the old man of the mountains with huge teeth. The males have a little bit kind of pink on their face, but mostly gray. And they're always scarred up because these guys have a big troop and only one guy's the boss. And they just fight hard with those teeth to compete to be the leader. So they're a very belligerent, warlike primate that are just, it's just primeval to see these guys in the forest. Now they don't threaten people or us, but, and then the females have a bright pink face or brighter pink face. There's some babies. So you can see these guys live a definitely cold area. So, and there's several troops. Some are wilder than others, and there's some very habituated troops that we can see that allow us to have some pretty fantastic photo opportunities. This guy is feeding on wild persimmons, on a wild persimmon tree next to the trail that we were walking on. This girl, sorry. So to be able to get a primate that's, you know, bushy and fuzzy like that, and all these interesting backdrops. Normally, you know, you think of primates in the jungle, in the rainforest, but here's next to a rushing mountain river, hopping from rock to rock, you know, next to waterfalls and conifer trees. To me, I just think it's a very unique, very special. There's also the Rhesus macaque that lives in certain areas, and you see the range of the Rhesus macaque. It goes all, so if you go see macaques in India on tiger trips, this is the same species, and they also live a little bit lower elevation in the same reserve, but they don't go as high as the Tibetan macaques, but we see them occasionally. This is the yellow-throated marten. I did a whole webinar on the musteleds, and this was one that I talked about a lot. So these are really cool. It's a large one, a large mustelid, in the member of the weasel family, I mean, and you can see their range. They are incredibly adaptable. They live in Borneo, in the jungles of Borneo and Indonesia. They live in the Himalayas. They also live all the way up in the boreal forests of Siberia. And they also live in this panda reserve and then in the mountains of Sichuan. Now, the coolest thing I think about these guys, they jump. They can have like 30-foot jumps, and of course, look at that huge tail for counterbalance. But the other unique thing about these guys is that they hunt in packs. Normally, members of the weasel family, think about weasels, ermine, or marten, wolverines, they are solitary. They just one. But the yellow-throated marten can have a pack, similar to a river otter. River otters also operate in packs and can help each other hunt as they sort of hunt fish together and get the schools rounded up. But the terrestrial weasel family members don't do that. But these guys do. They can hunt in up to two, up to several, and they can tag team deer, like large deer, which is amazing. They'll just jump up on the deer's back and just the deer can't do anything. You just bite around the neck. Eventually they get wore out, and there's 3 or 4 of them. And we've seen these guys just terrorizing down the rivers, just running. A lot of times I've seen lots of these guys, and I don't get a chance to get images of them because it's just too fast. But to see one is cool. I think it's one of my favorite weasel family members. There are 17 species of wildcats in China. I'm not going to go through all of them, but this is one that we commonly see. It's called the leopard cat. I took this image in Borneo, the same species. You'll see the range. It's just because it's my best leopard cat picture. But you see, again, this one can go into desert areas, Himalayas, the tropical rainforests, Borneo, all the way up to the taiga regions of eastern Siberia. So, you know, but here's one that I got just taking a night walk around our lodge and at night. And now I've kind of figured out, on the last trip I was there in last fall, or 2 falls ago, I guess, I kind of figured out there's a resident around the lodge that has a hunting, so kind of a hunting routine. He just goes and hits certain areas, and I figured that out. So I pretty much can find that guy any night I want. And there's a hog badger. They come out at night around. We see them on night walks a lot, but I never got great images of them. But occasionally we will see them during the day, even though they are very nocturnal. I've got a really good picture of this one, but I couldn't find it. I searched and searched. It just got too many pictures from China. But this is a masked palm civet. Again, another animal that lives in Borneo, but they look totally different up here in China. There's several different species of civets, which is kind of like we would think of as like a raccoon almost. And the reptile diversity is amazing. People that don't like snakes, don't worry. We don't do anything dangerous, and we're real careful, so it's not a threat of snakes. But this one is my favorite, and it's the red spotted green viper, and they're just beautiful. It's called the 7-step snake because apparently if you get bit by one, you can walk 7 steps and then you collapse. You just don't mess with them, and you know where they hang out. I know the places where they hang out. They hang out around rocks a lot at really high altitudes too, in cool areas. But they're easy to find because when it's warm out, they'll come up and bask on rocks. Or sometimes we'll see them at night when we're out on night hikes. And this guy, I've only seen one, but the Chinese mountain viper. Beautiful, stunning, beautiful snake. Birds, the diversity of birds is off the hook. And this is the golden pheasant. Just going to kind of go through. You might see golden pheasants in captivity in certain places because people obviously want to breed them, and look how beautiful they are. Absolutely beautiful. But to see one in the wild, and we've gotten very good. We've seen golden pheasants on every one of our trips, and sometimes numerous and sometimes really good photo ops. It's hiking along certain areas in the early morning and the evening, and we know where they hang out. And if we behave the right way and we're quiet, we've just had amazing. I mean, people that are familiar with this bird species, if they see these pictures, they're going to not even trust me anymore. They'll think that I'm just telling you that they're in the wild, but they really are. These are wild golden pheasants. These are 2 males fighting. Brown dipper. We have an American dipper, small gray bird that dives down. They usually go for almost all insects. These are bigger dippers, and this is not a great picture, but it just shows that these guys actually specialize in going after fish, which really surprised me. I'd never heard of that. Then I saw it. This is when you go into higher altitude areas, you get white-throated dipper. The niche of the chickadee in Eurasia are the tits. This is the great tit. This is a beautiful bird. Red-billed Leothrix. Durian redstart. Long-tailed minivet, female. The male is red and stunning. So you see them flying together. You got a bright red male and a bright yellow female. And there's a couple species of nuthatches as well, which you guys might be familiar. We also have a few species of nuthatches. There's another nuthatch. This is the Eurasian nuthatch. Warblers, I don't even know, I can't remember which warbler this is, but. And then lots of these beautiful more kinds of pheasants. This is the Chinese, this is the blood pheasant. It's beautiful on a real foggy morning. The blue-eared pheasant flying over the road, and again, dense fog. So just, I mean, it's just, you can go on and on. I mean, I listed how many, 500 species of mammals and 400 of birds, and so you can imagine there's some pretty amazing stuff. Now, when I said that there's 2,400 species of plants, again, just in this reserve. So we've seen in the forest, if you're a tree lover, you get to see all these really unique, beautiful trees like this red birch. And I love the red color of this of the paper birch kind of bark that comes off, and I love to photograph that. This is a Japanese maple in the wild. So a lot of times people will ask, oh, when's the best time to go? Well, there's 2 times to go, in the spring and the fall. And it just depends on whether you like flowers or fall colors more. So the flowers are fantastic. I mean, the red bud, if you hit it at the right time, at the right elevation, the red buds are phenomenal. These are just images of us. It's hard to look for wildlife when you just can't, every time you go around a corner, you get scenes like this. These gorgeous red bud trees. There are 571 species of rhododendron in China. Do you know that? 409 are endemic, meaning they're found only in China. So when you go up into these mountain areas in the springtime, I lived as a child for a part of it in the mountains of North Carolina, I became really, really sort of connected to rhododendrons. And so to see all these different species of rhododendrons in the wild in China is phenomenal. So, and just depends on when you go, as far as in the springtime, is which elevation the rhododendrons will be blooming. So you've got these massive elevation changes. Sorry guys, it's going to take a little longer. I just got a little ahead of myself. Too many tangents and stuff. But yeah, these are just all these different species of rhododendrons. I mean, there's not like common English names for all these species. One of our local guides is a PhD botanist. So all I do is take a picture of it and I'll say, what is this? And he like immediately send me the name of it, but it's always a Latin name and then a Chinese name. But for a rhododendron lover, this trip is fantastic. And azaleas, which is kind of a subgroup of the rhododendrons. There he is, our PhD, it's Corey. He's a botanist, and we were out on a hike one day and found this extremely rare orchid. And it's only been found several times, and he spotted it immediately. And so that was a real thrill for all of us. So obviously I've sold springtime a lot, but in the fall, you get some pretty unique stuff as well. You get all these great fall colors. And so there's lots of native and wild ginkgo trees. Ginkgos are incredible. It's like a living fossil. And they turn gorgeous. The fossils of ginkgos go back 200 million years. And some of the there's legends that there's some old native trees that are alive that are 2,500 years old. And this is one of them. It's listed as one of these old ancient ginkgos that turn gorgeous yellow in the fall. And then these look like maybe spruces that are sick but really pretty. But the green ones are spruce, but the yellow ones are larch or tamarack, which is a deciduous conifer. It's a cone-bearing tree, but it's deciduous, meaning its needles turn yellow and fall off in the fall. And they're fantastic and gorgeous. And those larches, man, oh. So these are just some images of a larch. And then just a whole bunch of different kinds of maples and hardwoods. Like I said, there's 2,400 species. So there's trees out there that I don't know what they are. And there's one of our trails. We're just hiking along, looking for wildlife, enjoying this gorgeous forest in the fall time. I'm almost done, Kendall. I'm sorry. Are you still there?
Of course I'm still here. You're doing great. Keep going.
Okay. So yeah, this typical panda habitat is this, and there are giant pandas here, but there's only 50 in this huge reserve. That's how, the pandas are very rare. And so we always have the chance, and we've had a couple sightings of giant pandas before, but you can't ever expect to see them. But just going to look for them, you get to see all this other fantastic stuff. So this bamboo understory with all these fantastic hardwoods and conifers in the overstory. So there we are, out looking for birds. Bella is on the left, and she's a bird expert, knows every bird by sight and sound. And then when you come in the fall, we go to the panda reserves. I'm sort of like the breeding centers up in the mountains in panda habitat, but they're in enclosures. You can get these great panda images with fall colors in the back. It's definitely a stunner. It's another red birch. This is a dove tree, a wild dove tree. It's just a very, very special, related to dogwoods. So above panda habitat, areas where we can't go, because there's no way to get up there, these rugged mountains that go well over 20,000 feet, that are protected under the panda habitat conservation. There is some very, very special animals that they didn't even know lived up there, because when you get up there, it's impossible to really find them. It's snow leopards. The WWF started setting game cameras up there and realized that a lot of this mountain country in panda habitat has protected snow leopards. This game camera image is actually mine. I took it. Well, I set the camera up to take it, but it's from India and the Indian Himalayas. But just to show you that snow leopard is its own umbrella species in itself, and I have done a webinar on snow leopards. But these are some images that I've taken of snow leopards. But this was in India. Some real special high altitude birds like the Himalayan Griffin. I took this on the NatHab trip when we were driving over one of the high passes. This is like a giant vulture with a 10-foot wingspan. So this is the high country above the panda habitat. And so that is going to hold lots of snow and even glaciers. And so you're going to get all this beautiful water coming down. And because most of this mountains are limestone, you get that blue color in the water as it goes through. A lot of it goes through the ground first. So you get waterfalls that are rich in limestone. And this is a national park that we don't visit any longer. We've picked a prettier one, but just to show you, again, areas that would be gone if the Chinese government had not decided giant pandas were a priority to conserve. And all this great water, almost done. Gives habitat and protected clean water for fish. A lot of different species of fish here that are extinct everywhere else. Fish are one of the first things that really go, because water quality, fish are sensitive to water quality. Humans tend to mess water quality up pretty bad, and fish are really easy and good to eat, easy to catch. People love them. So there's not a lot of places in China where you're going to have these incredible native fish populations that are protected. This is the Songpan naked carp. The limestone is so rich in the water that they have a totally smooth skin, because if they had normal scales, the limestone would end up crusting their skin over. So they've evolved a smooth skin. And this is the Chinese giant salamander, which is it's a delicacy in Asia. So therefore it's almost extinct. But they do live. And I took this image of one that a fisherman had caught in a river that wasn't protected and was kind of raising up to eat, I guess, or something. But that was kind of sad. But this guy can actually get to be 6 feet long and 200 pounds. And unlike other salamanders, they can basically be in the water without having to come up for air, because they've got these folds in the skin, so you have a lot of surface area for respiration. So as we travel through, it's just about not, it's about getting excited about everything under the pandas umbrella, enjoying the pandas in the breeding centers, going up and enjoying panda habitat with a chance of seeing a giant panda, but then looking at all these incredible things. And one of the things that we've done in the past when it's available is we will go bring our folks. There's our other China guide, Eddie, going to visit rural schools and panda habitat, like out in the remote areas, and showing them pictures of all these birds. So if these guys have never seen foreigners before, we have these handouts we make, and we donate nature animal books, and you just kind of like to hopefully instill this kind of interest in these rural Chinese. You got some incredible things in the mountains, these birds and everything, and it's enough for a group of 10 Europeans and Americans to fly over to enjoy it. So, we encourage the kids to be rangers, be biologists, be guides, take an interest in the wild animals, and take an interest in conservation. So I think that's one of the great things that these trips have done. Okay, so I'm done now. And if you like this and you want to read more about giant pandas, or if you want to know who this George Schaller guy that I keep talking about is, that would be a fantastic book. It's a great adventure book. George Schaller is one of the wildest, most adventurous conservationists in history, that was the first one to ever study giant pandas in the wild. Was invited under WWF by China as the first outside organization or foreigner to come in and help them with conservation. Brought George Schaller in here, and he helped them figure out how to keep the pandas from going extinct as recently as the 1980s. Way of the Panda is also a fantastic book. It tells the whole giant panda conservation story. If you want to see more of my stuff, I've got a blog for NatHab. It's called alaskabearsandwolves.com. And if you click China as one of my categories, you'll see I've got tons of articles on China. And then there's my Instagram page, Brad Joseph's Photos. And now a lot of people log off during question time, but I'm gonna just go through an incredible slideshow as I answer the questions, because there's so many amazing scenes that I want to share. Okay, I'm ready for questions.
Thank you, Brad. Yeah, that's a great idea. People just love looking at your photos. So that's a wonderful idea. So I just want to remind everyone who's watching, if you have a question for Brad, you can submit those in your control panel under the questions field. Okay, we've got a lot of good questions about a variety of species you talked about today. First one is, are red pandas as difficult as giant pandas in terms of breeding and conservation?
No, they're much easier to breed. Yeah, so there's some of the breeding centers that we go to, there's quite a few red pandas, and we can get within touching distance of them. They're just walking around. They're very docile. But in terms of giant pandas are very hard to breed in captivity. Red pandas aren't a big deal. But as far as conservation goes, they're very difficult. And there's just not that many of them out there. And there's a lot of areas, like in the Himalayan areas of India and stuff, where there's still a lot of poaching that goes on because their fur is coveted. So yeah, so they have, I think, actually a harder time in the future than giant pandas, because they don't have the attention. There's no animal in the world that has the value and attention that the Chinese at least have put on giant pandas and conservation of them.
So there was some curiosity about moon bears and sun bears, and if they're closely related, and what the main differences are.
They are closely related. The reason a sun bear is called a sun bear is this golden patch on the chest. But a moon bear has a patch on the chest, but it's white and it's moon shaped. And I don't think those pictures really showed that very good, but that's why it's sun and moon. Sun bears live in the very, very tropical areas where moon bears do not live. Sun bears are very tiny. The biggest male would be about 100 pounds. Moon bear is similar size to our American black bear. It can get up to be 500 or 600 pounds, something like that. So I guess that's kind of those are kind of the main differences, is where they live and their size, and then the color on their chest.
Great. And how long will a moon bear keep its nest?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. It's not when they build that nest, according to like there's very little I mean, this is just stuff. The only information that I know about moon bears really is in the wild, is just by asking these local rangers and local guys that are in the forest and just kind of gathering their local knowledge. And it seems to me that they only use that nest until they've eaten everything out of that tree that's available. Then they'll go build a nest in the next tree that they find that they can feed in. So it's not like they come back to the same nest. If they did, then it'd be a lot easier for us to find them, because we would just sit there and wait till they come back to the nest at night. So it's, you know, just really like they work a tree till it's cashed out, then they go and build a new nest and hang out in that tree until it's cashed out.
Mm-hmm. Is there much of a size difference between male and female takins?
Yes, there is. I can't really give you numbers on it, but it's pretty. It's going to be a few hundred pounds. The males are just bigger and more muscular. Mm-hmm. Not a huge size difference actually, but you can definitely tell.
And
male from a female.
Do takins have any predators, and what do they eat?
Takins basically feed on any kind of brush and vegetation. So a lot of times we'll find the old males will hang out in the river bottoms because they love to eat willow, just like a moose loves willow, and they grow in the river bottoms. As far as predators go, I think that's actually a problem in this park, because there's no predators that can kill any other than babies or really, really old ones. And the predators in the park would be moon bears. And then with a calf, it's potential for a pack of yellow-throated martens. In other areas, and we did see some but Tibetan wolves might go after them, but they're pretty limited. This area used to be inhabited by lots of wolves and tigers. Tigers are extinct there. So they don't actually, the places where where humans have stopped hunting them, that's the main predator from poaching, because of course I've heard that takin tastes delicious. So they're heavily hunted, like they're the #1 animal for hunters to go for wild meat. But not in this reserve or any of the reserves. But I think that they, takin are they're also, well, they eat a lot of bamboo, actually, is one of their favorite foods. And so they actually are direct competitors of pandas. So having tons of takin is great. But actually, to be honest, it's not great. It's not the best for the pandas, but it is what it is, and that's just nature.
Okay. So how big are golden monkeys?
I think probably about maybe 40 pounds, and they stand up about, well, when they're sitting there, probably 3 feet tall or so.
And really quickly, could you repeat the name of the movie you mentioned earlier about that have golden monkeys in it?
Oh yeah, Born in China, and it's on Netflix for free.
Great. There was a question about golden pheasants. Are the females as colorful as the males?
Oh, good question. No, I would never even I've seen females, and I would never even remember that they're totally drab brown. There's zero color, and they're impossible to see because they're just brown. But the males stand out like a beacon in the forest.
Yeah, they are beautiful. Okay, I'm going to move on to a couple questions about the China trip. Do you know what the highest altitude is on this trip?
We spend the night, I'm trying to remember what it is, around something like 11,000 feet for 2 nights. A little over 10 or something like that, but it's in that range. And then the most we will go to during the day, as an option, we will go up to 12,000 just for a little while and then come back down. And then we go over another pass that's about 11,000 feet. I think that's what it is. It's just been a couple years almost since I've been there, and I can't remember that number exactly. But it's no more than 12. We're not up at 12 for very long. We've never had a problem with anybody at the high altitude, because I think we're already up at high altitude or medium altitude for a while, and then we drive up over a high pass, and your body kind of gets used to it, and then you drop down. And really, the key to high altitude is you spend the night lower than you had been that day.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we have oxygen if anybody needed it, and we can get down really fast. But we've had people concerned about it, and they go anyway, because we give them options if they don't want to go to those altitudes. And everybody tries it, and we haven't had any problems. Nobody's gotten altitude sickness or anything other than being just a little bit short of breath.
Okay, great. And sort of on that subject, how difficult is this trip physically?
I think this trip is difficult in any of the hiking excursions are not mandatory. We will make options, but a lot of the wildlife that you saw on this trip, on this presentation, or any of the other stuff we do is just generally on like good hard walking paths, or a dirt road, or a good trail, or a boardwalk. And we don't go up, super steep, although we always provide options to split the group and do more difficult hikes. But it is a rigorous trip because the itinerary, we're trying to pack in so much that it is definitely an exhausting trip, I would say, but wonderfully exhausting. But I think that you need to be travel hardy to do the trip. But it's not like a snow leopard trip where you have to be able to, hike at super, super high altitude, and you need to be in really, really good shape. It's not like that, not even close.
So there's a couple people who look like they're really interested in botany and want to know that if they were to be on this trip, is there any sort of botany focus?
There certainly can be, and that's why our team is made up of different people with different specialties. So, but if that botanist specialist isn't there, who's as good as any botanist in Sichuan, when all I need to do is if I see a flower, I can take a picture of it, send it to him, and he just sends me back the information of what it is, IDs it for me. Okay. And the local rangers, although they don't know the English names, because there's no English names to all these plants, because why would, it's not like, oh, that's the red orchid. I mean, these are just, there's stuff that doesn't exist, most of it. But like the rangers all know, they know all the plants. Then we have local ranger guides, as well as our local guides, as well as me or a NatHab guide. And they will do things like, if I say, hey, she's really interested in trees, we will be able to find out every name of tree or the Latin name, but knows like, oh, I'll go show you this dove tree, or there's a special orchid that's blooming here now. So there is some focus on the botany, and we try to be well-rounded. So there's some birds, but it's not a total birding trip. It's mostly mammals. There's some culture, but it's not a culture trip. So we hit everything and try to make everybody happy. And so we're very, very serious about that.
Great. So I'll take one last question since we're about a quarter past the hour. Beyond pandas, which of the species you're discussing today is the Chinese government making a concerted effort to protect?
Oh, they're pretty serious about everything now, to be honest, in these regions. So snow leopards for sure, golden monkeys for sure, the umbrella species, and giant pandas, red pandas they are. So the way the Chinese conservation, it's actually, this is, and that webinar I did with Philip, he really explains it. And this is just the feeling that I get, is that, the Chinese used to very much hunt lots of bush meat and different things and go for a while. But in these regions, when the Chinese government puts a law down, people just generally, it gets to the point now where, of course, China is a powerful government, and they just don't break the law. So it's getting better, much better and better, very fast as far as stopping sort of poaching, especially for the key species. I mean, if you get caught with this part trying to sell the skin of a red panda, you're gonna face some serious consequences. And Chinese have a way of just finding out, they can just track you down very quickly. So it scares people away from doing that. So yeah, it just depends on where it is, but yeah, I mean, it would be those key animals. But in the reserves itself, it's everything, and you can't hurt anything in those reserves, and that's a great point. And then the reserve staff are very serious about that.
All right, well, great. This was just wonderful as usual, Brad. Thank you so much. Your photos were just amazing, and I know a lot of people watching today, whether they've been there or not, cannot wait to get back to China. So thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. I'm going to hand it over to you for closing comments.
Oh, yeah, just thank you guys. I mean, I think I kind of talked about everything. It's a big subject. China's a huge subject for me. It's impossible for me to do all the aspects in one webinar. Just there's so much. So it's just to me in my life, when I first went to China in 2008, it was just kind of a mysterious place that I was kind of nervous about going, and I wasn't sure if I was going to really like it. And ever since then, it's just like a treasure chest that I just keep pulling out beautiful things, be it how wonderful the people are, these conservation stories, new animals that I get to see in the wild, and just the exotic nature and the food and everything like. So to me, it's just China's been very, very special in my life, and I love to share it with people. And I'm so glad that NatHab that we've put together this incredible trip. People leave there with a totally different view and feel of China than they could ever possibly have before they go.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Brad. Again, this was wonderful. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. Be sure to join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. We did record today's presentation, and we'll have a replay available on our website soon. And with that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.